A man is dying in a hospital bed in Amman, Jordan. The monitors show his lungs failing, his blood oxygen dropping, his brain slowing. Doctors surround him, running every toxicology panel they know. Every test comes back clean. There is nothing in his blood, nothing in his tissue, nothing anywhere that explains why this 41-year-old man, who walked into his office perfectly healthy 8 hours ago, is now on a ventilator, slipping into a coma he will not wake from. It is the night of September 25, 1997, and nobody in this room can save him. 3 miles away, in a quiet hotel room, a man sits on the edge of his bed holding a small glass vial. He is an Israeli intelligence officer. The vial contains the only substance on Earth that can reverse what is happening inside that hospital. He stands up, walks to the bathroom, holds the vial over the sink. His orders are clear. Destroy everything. Leave no trace. His phone rings. An assassination that undid itself. An intelligence agency forced to save the man it had just poisoned. A prime minister who ordered a man's death and then was forced to undo everything to survive the consequences. It started with blood in a Jerusalem market 2 months earlier. Jerusalem, July 30, 1997. The Mahana Yehuda market is packed. It is a Thursday afternoon and the narrow stone corridors are shoulder to shoulder with shoppers. Fruit vendors calling prices, spice stalls filling the air with cumin and cardamom, families buying bread for Shabbat dinner. It is one of the oldest open-air markets in the city, and on this afternoon, it is full of life. At 1:40 in the afternoon, 2 explosions tear through the crowd within seconds of each other. The blasts rip through the packed corridors and turn the market into something unrecognizable. 16 people lose their lives. More than 160 are wounded. The devastation scatters across the ancient stone. The screaming does not stop for hours. Hamas claims responsibility before the smoke clears. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in his first term. His coalition is fracturing. His right-wing base is demanding blood. And now, 16 of his citizens are dead in the heart of Jerusalem, lost to an organization that has launched multiple bombings that summer. A separate attack in Tel Aviv pushes the combined death toll past 20. Netanyahu does not want a defensive response. He does not want a press conference. He wants a name. And he wants that name erased. He convenes his inner security cabinet. Defense Minister Yitzhak Mordecai, Infrastructure Minister Ariel Sharon, and the Director of the Mossad, Danny Yatam. The meeting is tense, urgent, and short. Netanyahu did not want to be the man who said no, not with 16 bodies still warm. The pressure to act, to authorize, to look decisive shaped everything that came next. The name they gave him was Khaled Mashal. 6,000 miles from that cabinet room, in the Jordanian capital of Amman, a man runs the deadliest fundraising operation in the Middle East. He does not carry a weapon. He does not build bombs. He raises money. He coordinates strategy. He connects Hamas's donors in the Gulf to its operational cells inside Gaza and the West Bank. Israeli intelligence assesses him not as a figurehead, but as the central node. Danny Yatam will later state that all significant Hamas attack planning during this period led directly back to this man. His name is Khaled Mashal, chairman of the Hamas Political Bureau. And every morning, he drives to his office in Amman's Shemaisani neighborhood like a man who believes he is untouchable. He is about to find out how wrong that belief is. But first, Israel has to solve a problem. Mashal lives in Jordan, and Jordan has had a peace treaty with Israel since 1994, one that King Hussein personally bled for. Just 6 months earlier, after a Jordanian soldier took the lives of 7 Israeli schoolgirls, King Hussein had flown to Israel, knelt before the grieving families, and wept with them. Former Mossad deputy chief Ephraim Halevi warned Netanyahu directly, Operating in Amman would make King Hussein look like Israel's puppet in front of the entire Arab world. It would be seen as a personal betrayal. Netanyahu overrode every objection. The hit was approved. Somewhere in Amman, Khaled Mashal was finishing his morning coffee. He said goodbye to his daughter. He climbed into the back seat of his car. He had no idea that inside a classified laboratory halfway across the world, behind concrete walls most Israelis will never see, scientists were already designing the substance that would nearly end his life. And that within weeks, a team of assassins would be walking through the same streets he drove every morning, carrying a weapon no target had ever survived. The assignment went to Caesarea, Mossad's elite operational division. The parameters were absolute. No bullets, no explosions, no evidence. The target had to die in a way that would appear entirely natural. No crime scene, no fingerprints, no proof Israel was ever involved. Mossad turned to the Israel Institute for Biological Research, a secretive facility in Nes Ziona, south of Tel Aviv. Scientists were given a single task: design a substance that ends a life without leaving a trace. What they produced was a modified derivative of fentanyl, roughly 100 times more potent than morphine, absorbed through skin on contact. Over hours, the victim would feel a headache, then nausea. Then his lungs would begin to fail. He would slip into a coma, and within 48 hours, his brain would shut down completely. If everything went right, Mashal would go to sleep, and he would never wake up. The agents would be out of Jordan before anyone realized something was wrong. The delivery method? A small needleless device concealed beneath a medical bandage on an operative's hand. It could aerosolize the substance and spray it directly onto skin from close range. No syringe, no puncture wound, no visible weapon. But the plan had one feature that would prove to be its most consequential. Standard protocol required the team to carry the specific antidote on site, in case an operative accidentally exposed himself. A precaution designed to protect the assassins. Nobody imagined it would be used to protect the target. In mid-September 1997, approximately 1 week before the planned strike, a team of 6 to 8 Mossad agents entered Jordan. They flew into Queen Aliyah International Airport on separate flights from Amsterdam, Toronto, and Paris. They never traveled together. They never acknowledged each other. Each one carried an expertly forged Canadian passport. Names like Sean Kindle and Barry Beads, identities stolen from real Canadian citizens, exploiting Canada's global reputation as a country whose citizens are waved through border checkpoints without a second glance. At Queen Aliyah Airport, families arrived for vacations. Businessmen collected luggage. Tour groups organized outside the terminal, and filtering through the same customs lines, 6 agents carried enough poison to end a life, and enough documentation to start an international incident. Separately, another man checked into an Amman hotel, Mishka bin David, the chief intelligence officer of Caesarea. He carried a single glass vial in his luggage. Inside it was the antidote, the failsafe, the insurance policy. The modified compound was so potent that even accidental skin contact during the spray could incapacitate the operative delivering it. The vial was a safety net for his own team. It was never, under any scenario, supposed to be used on Khaled Mashal. For 1 week, the team observed. They mapped Mashal's routine with meticulous precision. Every morning, he was driven to the Hamas offices in Shmeisani, cafes on the sidewalks, parents walking children to school, the ordinary rhythm of a city that had no idea what was coming. The team identified the window. Every morning, there was a brief, vulnerable moment between the time Mashal stepped out of his car and the time he entered the building. A few seconds of exposure on an open sidewalk. That was the gap. The choreography was precise. The primary operative would approach from behind as Mashal walked toward the entrance. Using the concealed device beneath his bandaged arm, he would press it against Marshall's left ear and trigger the spray. Simultaneously, a second operative would open a vigorously shaken soda can. The sudden fizz would mask the faint hissing sound. If Marshall glanced back, he would see nothing but a clumsy tourist whose drink had spilled. Rehearsed, tested, every variable accounted for, every contingency planned. Except one. Nobody planned for a child's voice. And in roughly 6 seconds, that voice would tear it all apart. September 25, 1997. Morning. The sun is up over Amman. Traffic fills the streets of Shmisani. A bread seller arranges loaves behind glass. A taxi idles at a red light. 2 men loiter near the entrance of an office building, dressed like tourists. Light jackets, casual shoes. One has a bandage on his arm. The other holds a sealed can of soda. A black sedan pulls to the curb. The rear door opens. Khaled Mashal steps out. Behind him, still inside the car, his young daughter sits in the back seat. The primary agent moves. He closes the gap from behind. 3 steps. 2. His bandaged hand rises toward Mashal's left ear. And then the girl calls out. Her voice cuts through the morning noise. A daughter calling to her father. Something she forgot. Something she wanted to say. It does not matter what it was. What matters is that Mashal turns his head. Instinct. Reflex. A father responding to his child. He turns at the exact fraction of a second that the agent triggers the device. The spray hits, but not where it was supposed to. Instead of being delivered deep into the ear canal, the aerosolized substance makes contact with the outer skin of Mashal's ear and the side of his head. It is enough to poison him, but not enough for the instant, deep absorption the plan required. Behind them, the second agent freezes. The shaken soda can stays sealed in his hand. He was supposed to pop it at exactly this moment, the fizz masking the sound. But Mashal's sudden movement startled him. His hand did not move. The distraction that was supposed to make the encounter look like an accident never happened. The whole thing looks wrong. 2 men, too close, in an interaction that has no reason to exist. Mashal feels it immediately. A loud noise in his ear, like a boom, like an electric shock. Then an unnatural shivering through his entire body. He knows something has happened, but the initial sting fades. The men are already moving away. He thinks, for a moment, that whatever they tried to do, they failed. He walks into his office, sits down, begins his day. His daughter's voice still echoing in his mind. A perfectly ordinary morning, except that his body has already begun to die. The substance is already in his bloodstream, and every minute that passes, it is moving deeper, binding to receptors in his brainstem, beginning the slow, silent process of shutting down the one thing keeping him alive, his ability to breathe. He does not feel it yet. He will. And somewhere across the city, in a quiet hotel room, Mishka Ben David sits with a glass vial in his luggage, waiting for confirmation that the operation went clean. He does not know yet that his phone is about to ring with orders that will demolish everything the operation was built for. Mohammed Abu Saif saw everything. Abu Saif is Mashal's personal bodyguard. He has been watching the street for irregularities since before the car even stopped. The 2 men near the entrance had caught his attention. Something about the way they were positioned, the way they watched the door but pretended not to. The body language of people trying too hard to look casual. The moment the agent made his move toward Mashal, Abu Saif was already in motion. But he made a decision that most bodyguards would not make. Instead of staying with Mashal, the standard protective protocol, he launched himself after the fleeing agents. The 2 operatives sprinted from the scene. They reached a pre-positioned Hyundai, drove it a short distance to break the visual line, then abandoned it near a local school. Children walked past the car minutes later, oblivious. The agents got out, slowed to a casual walk and headed down a busy street. Two Canadians on vacation, nothing to see. Abu Saif did not lose them. He closed the distance on foot, caught up to the two men on the sidewalk, and threw himself at them. What followed was a brutal, desperate, hand-to-hand fight in the middle of a busy Amman street. Trained Mossad operatives against a single bodyguard who refused to let go. Abu Saif took a gashing blow to his head. Blood poured down his face. He did not release his grip. A Palestinian Liberation Army officer passing by saw the struggle and jumped in. A Jordanian architect named Omar Abu Rose ran over from across the street. Abu Rose found Abu Saif bleeding severely, teeth clenched, both hands locked onto the arms of two foreign men fighting desperately to break free. Abu Saif grabbed Rose's mobile phone with one blood-soaked hand and called the Jordanian authorities. His words to the dispatcher were direct. "Israeli agents. They just attacked Khaled Mashal." Within minutes, Jordanian police swarmed the scene. The two operatives were arrested, handcuffed, and hauled away. The remaining 4 Mossad agents, scattered around the periphery of the operation, watched the street collapse into chaos. They had seconds to decide. They abandoned their exfiltration routes and ran. Every one of them fled to the Israeli embassy in Amman, the only sovereign Israeli territory within reach. They made it inside. The Jordanian military did not follow them in. Instead, special forces cordoned the entire building. Armed soldiers surrounded every entrance. Snipers took positions on the rooftops across the street. No one was getting out. Israel now had 2 agents in Jordanian custody, and 4 more trapped inside their own embassy, surrounded by armed soldiers. In less than 20 minutes, a plan that had taken weeks to prepare had disintegrated into the worst possible scenario. Operatives exposed, cover blown, evidence in enemy hands, and the target still alive. Because inside that office building in Shmeisani, something was beginning to happen to Khaled Mashal. Something slow, something invisible. The poison was doing exactly what it had been designed to do. And this intelligence disaster was about to become an international crisis. 2 hours after the attack, Mashal's head begins to pound. Not the ordinary kind. A blinding, crushing pressure behind his eyes that makes him grip the edge of his desk. Then the nausea hits. He vomits. Twice. 3 times. His staff rush him to King Hussein Medical Center, the premier hospital in Amman. By late afternoon, his respiratory system begins to fail. His lungs stop pulling air on their own. Doctors intubate him, threading a tube down his throat and connecting him to a mechanical ventilator. Without it, he will suffocate within minutes. His oxygen saturation continues to drop. His brain function slows. By nightfall, Khaled Mashal is in a deep, unresponsive coma. The doctors are baffled. They test for nerve agents. Nothing. They administer atropine. It does nothing. Because the substance inside Mashal is not a nerve agent. It is an opioid derivative. The doctors do not know this. They are fighting the wrong enemy. And every minute they spend guessing wrong, the compound pushes deeper into his brainstem. After urgent consultations, the medical team concludes a massive dose of some kind of opiate-type substance has been administered. But they cannot identify which one. They do not have the antidote, and without it, their patient will be dead within days. The only people on Earth who have that antidote are the ones who just tried to end his life. That is Clock 1. Clock 2 is already ticking in the royal palace. When Jordanian intelligence confirmed the identity of the captured men, not tourists, but Israeli Mossad operatives, King Hussein erupted. He had staked his reputation, his legacy, and his throne on the belief that Netanyahu could be trusted. And now Netanyahu had sent assassins into his capital to poison a man under the protection of the Jordanian state. Everything Halevi had warned about was happening. The king issued an ultimatum. Provide the antidote immediately. If Mashal dies, the 2 captured agents will be tried and executed. The peace treaty will be voided. The 4 agents in the embassy will not leave Jordan alive. He called the President of the United States. Bill Clinton listened. By the end of the call, he was furious. Dennis Ross, Clinton's chief Middle East negotiator, received a phone call from Netanyahu that morning. Ross asked one question: "What were you thinking?" No one in Washington was willing to defend what Israel had done. Clinton made the message to Netanyahu absolute. Provide the antidote, save Mashal's life, preserve the peace treaty, or face the United States withdrawing its support for the entire Israeli-Jordanian relationship. Netanyahu was trapped. Completely. Irreversibly. If he handed over the antidote, Israel would be admitting to the assassination attempt. Publicly. Undeniably. On Allied soil. If he refused and Mashal died, the agents would be executed. The peace treaty would collapse. Canada was already demanding answers about the forged passports, and the United States, Israel's most critical ally, would be standing on the other side of the table. If you were Netanyahu that night, your agents captured, a king threatening to execute them, a man dying from your own poison, and the only way out is to save the enemy you just tried to eliminate, what would you do? There is no good answer. In the Amman hotel room, Mishka bin David hears his phone ring. He has been in this room since before the hit, holding the glass vial containing the antidote. After the operation collapsed, his orders were simple: destroy all evidence, flush the vial, clean the room, disappear. He was standing over the bathroom sink, the vial in his hand, when the phone rang. His new orders were the opposite of everything he had been trained for. Take the antidote downstairs, walk into the hotel lobby, hand the vial to the Jordanian intelligence officers who are waiting for you. He walked downstairs, through the lobby, past the front desk where tourists were checking in, and he handed the glass vial to the men waiting by the door. The agent whose job was to eliminate traces was now surrendering the most incriminating piece of evidence imaginable. Simultaneously, Danny Yatam, the director of the Mossad, the man who had personally planned and overseen the assassination, boarded a plane to Amman. He carried the precise chemical formula for the antidote and authorization from the Prime Minister to hand it over. The chief of the intelligence agency that tried to end Khaled Mashal's life was now flying to the same city to save it. The same hands that signed the death order now carrying the cure. But there was one more obstacle. At King Hussein Medical Center, when the Jordanian doctors received the antidote, they refused to administer it. Their reasoning was logical and terrifying. How could they trust a substance provided by the same people who had just poisoned their patient? For all they knew, this was designed to finish the job, not reverse it. Netanyahu was forced to release the classified chemical formula, the exact composition, the molecular structure, the delivery mechanism. Information that revealed the precise nature of the weapon Mossad had used. Information that any intelligence agency on Earth would pay a fortune to obtain. He gave it away for free, to save a man he had ordered eliminated. The doctors verified it independently and administered the antidote. For the first time in nearly 48 hours, the monitors in Mashal's hospital room stopped their slow, relentless decline. The numbers held. Then, almost imperceptibly, they began to climb. The poison was losing its grip. But the antidote came with a price that was still being negotiated 3 floors below. According to reporting from Ronen Bergman and accounts from senior Israeli officials, the authorization came in the middle of the night. Netanyahu picked up the phone. Those present described his voice as hoarse, strained. He said 2 words. On September 27, 1997, 2 days after a Mossad agent sprayed poison into his ear on a quiet Amman street, Khaled Mashal opened his eyes. His vital signs stabilized. His lungs began pulling air on their own. The coma lifted. He was alive, saved by the people who tried to end him. Israel's most feared intelligence agency had not simply failed to eliminate its target. It had been forced to reverse its own assassination in real time in front of the entire world. Years later, Mashal would describe the moment he regained consciousness. The white ceiling of a hospital room, the tube in his throat, the faces of people he recognized, and slowly, the understanding of what had happened, that he had been poisoned, that he had nearly died, and that the very people who had done it had been forced to undo it. But the antidote saved Mashal's life. It did not save Israel from what came next. The cost of what Netanyahu had just authorized was only beginning to reveal itself. King Hussein had Mashal breathing. He had 2 Mossad agents in custody. He had 4 more trapped in an embassy. And he had the entire world watching. He needed a concession massive enough to justify releasing the men who had just tried to commit an attack in his capital. He demanded Sheikh Ahmed Yassin. Yassin was not an ordinary prisoner. He was the founder of Hamas, its spiritual leader, its ideological architect. A 61-year-old man, nearly blind, quadriplegic, confined to a wheelchair, serving a life sentence since 1989 for ordering the creation of the Al-Qassam Brigades, Hamas's military wing. He was the most important Palestinian prisoner in Israeli custody. Netanyahu resisted. Releasing the founder of Hamas was a strategic nightmare, but the crisis was escalating by the hour. The agents' lives were at stake. Washington was not backing down, and the leverage was entirely in Jordan's hands. He authorized the release. On October 1st, 1997, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin was loaded onto a Jordanian Armed Forces helicopter and flown from Israeli custody to Amman. He received medical treatment in a Jordanian hospital before being permitted to return to the Gaza Strip. He arrived to a hero's welcome. Thousands filled the streets. The blind, wheelchair-bound old man, imprisoned for 8 years, was free. Hamas had its founder back. Not because of a military victory, not because of a negotiation from strength, but because a Mossad assassination went wrong. Along with Yassin, Israel released dozens of additional Palestinian and Jordanian political prisoners, some of them serving long sentences for attacks that had taken Israeli lives. The scale of the concession was staggering. An entire operation designed to punish Hamas had ended with the largest unilateral Israeli prisoner release in years. Dennis Ross, Clinton's chief Middle East negotiator, would later write in his memoir, The Missing Piece, what started as an operation to demonstrate the costs to the Hamas leadership ended with Israel permitting the spiritual leader of Hamas to return to Gaza as a hero. Netanyahu flew to Amman personally to apologize. The Prime Minister of Israel, sitting in the Jordanian capital, waiting to beg forgiveness from the king whose trust he had shattered. King Hussein refused to see him. The door never opened. Netanyahu delivered his apology to Crown Prince Hassan instead, and flew home carrying a humiliation that would follow him for the rest of his. He lost his re-election bid in 1999. Canada recalled its ambassador after confirming the forged passports were built on stolen Canadian identities. And inside Mossad, the reckoning came swiftly. Danny Atom resigned as director and was replaced by Ephraim Halevi, the quiet diplomat who had salvaged the wreckage. The man Israel tried to erase became the most famous Palestinian political figure of his generation. In a 2008 interview, Mashal described the effect the attempt had on him. "I became more courageous in the face of death. I will die when God decides, not when Mossad decides." He led Hamas's political bureau for 21 years, outlasted every Israeli prime minister who served during that period. The failed hit did not weaken him. It made him untouchable. And then there is Yassin. He returned to Gaza and immediately rebuilt the Al-Qassam Brigades. When the Second Intifada erupted in the year 2000, his leadership was central to the massive escalation of violence, bombings that took hundreds of Israeli lives over the next several years. Israel spent 7 years fighting the consequences of his release, 7 years of attacks, 7 years of funerals, 7 years of a man they once held behind bars, now directing operations from a wheelchair in Gaza City. On March 22, 2004, in the pre-dawn darkness, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin left a mosque in Gaza City after morning prayer. He was in his wheelchair, surrounded by followers. An Israeli helicopter gunship appeared over the skyline. Missiles struck. He was 67 years old. Released because of a botched assassination, returned to lead Hamas through its most violent era, and then destroyed by a missile from the sky, still sitting in his wheelchair. The circle took 7 years to close, and every one of those bombings was, in some measure, a consequence of a September morning in Amman when a soda can did not open and a bodyguard refused to let go. The most sophisticated weapon in the world, undone by a daughter's voice and a soda can that never opened. Does the cycle of assassination and consequence ever end? Drop your answer in the comments. Khaled Mashal is still alive. As of this recording, he remains a senior Hamas leader. And somewhere in the classified archives of the Mossad, there is a file on the Amman operation. A file that documents the day an intelligence officer held a glass vial over a hotel sink, ready to destroy the only thing that could save his target, and then answered a phone call that ordered him to hand it over. The agency that tried to end a man's life was forced to save it, and in the end, they walked away with nothing.